Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Geeks with Wives podcast. This is episode 147. We've got a great show for you this evening. I am your host, Jeff Gordon, and I'm joined tonight by a star-studded crew, as I like to say. Joining us tonight from CNET is Ian Scher. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing all right.
Yeah. And how's everything in San Francisco?
It's beautiful here, actually. It's a little gray, but that's what summers are about in San Francisco. My favorite postcard that you can buy here is just gray on the front, and in the back it says "The View from San Francisco."
I love it. Well, I'm glad everything's going okay over there. And you could hear him laughing in the background. That is Andrew Barton. How are you doing, sir?
Doing well. How are you, Jeff?
Man, I'm great. I'm actually really good because last week was the 30th anniversary of the Nintendo Entertainment System. And I'm really excited to be able to talk about that tonight because that will be our main topic. And I look forward to hearing what our experiences were with it. And also tonight we're going to be talking about what our first video game experiences were and what our first favorite game was. So what was the first game that wooed us? And I'm really excited to talk about that. But before we do that, we're going to talk about the games that we're playing. Ian, I haven't talked to you in a while. What have you been playing recently?
I've been very bad. I have not had any time to play anything. I have been playing Ian Has to Work. It's a daily game from 9 to 5 at least. No, so I actually have a Destiny beta sitting in my little pocket, and I'm planning to fire that up this weekend to see what it's like. But it's really been hard. It's definitely been kind of crunch time for me. So no games.
Have you heard a lot of people, talking, saying good things about the beta? Have you
so
heard
far,
a lot
it seems there's a lot of excitement around it. I mean, if I'm following. I follow a ton of people on Twitter, and it seems as though that there's a lot of people who are really excited about it. Sony and Microsoft have both put their executives on live casts using Twitch to show it off. So a lot of people seem to be excited about it, and so far it seems pretty positive. It's really interesting because I feel like the hype around the game hasn't been that strong compared to. I don't know what. I feel like a game like Halo has a ton of hype, and maybe it's just me, and maybe it's just the world that I'm inhabiting and the stuff I'm looking at, but I feel like the hype machine hasn't gotten into full gear yet. It's starting to get there. So I'm really curious to see how people respond to it. Part of it is also marketing, right? I mean, this game has been, what is it? I mean, it's been publicly known now for 2 years, and at this point it's kind of like, okay, show me, rubber has to hit the road now. So maybe it's that. I don't know. I imagine this being Bungie and Activision, both companies know how to market the hell out of something. And so odds are that we're going to start seeing a lot of that stuff start sprouting up. And this is the first parts of that, right? The beta is always it's becoming a part of the marketing machine, which is really fascinating. So we'll see. I'm really curious, and I'm excited to try it out myself.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard plenty about it, the fact that every single PlayStation 4 ad has Destiny in it. So it has been great I've played a little bit of it, and it has been great to at least understand what it actually is, because it's just kind of been a name and maybe like an idea. But until you actually get your hands on it, like, you start to understand, okay, like, this is what Bungie's trying to do. So. And are there any games that you're looking forward to playing once the madness slows down?
Yeah, I think that for this year, I'm definitely going to try out the Assassin's Creed when it comes. But when it comes to the short-term stuff, I'm probably going to play. I don't know what I'm going to play in the near term. There hasn't been much that's on my list. I played a little bit of Watch Dogs and I enjoyed it. Played Mario Kart and I was really impressed. It was a lot better than I thought it would be. There's just been kind of, I don't know, there's been a lull lately in games, and I feel like it'll probably pick up around September when Grand Theft Auto and then all the rest of them starts coming out after that. But it's going to be really interesting. I'm really kind of. It seems like the slate of games this year is pretty manageable, as opposed to next year when it seems like I'm going to be. I could like the stack will be so high if it fell on me, it might kill me. So it's going to be. I think I can play around with a bunch of them. Yeah. I know that I'm probably not going to play through every one of them, the big ones. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting, and because now Call of Duty, and we just found out today that Battlefield Hardline is going to be pushed into 2015. That means I get to play a little more of Call of Duty and a little more of Battlefield Hardline, and not feel like I'm cheating on one of the others.
Awesome. Well, can I make a suggestion to you? Can I make a video game suggestion? Because this is the game that I'm playing right now, and that is Shovel Knight. I'm playing it on the Wii U. And are you familiar with it?
No, I'm not. Tell me about it.
Okay, so Shovel Knight was actually a Kickstarter project, and it was developed by a developer named Yacht Club Games, and it is, very much in line with what a lot of these quote-unquote indie titles are, which is it's kind of like a throwback to the old Super Nintendo NES games.
And, you mean Famicom?
Oh, there you go. There you go. Yeah, let's be correct on that. And so it's a blast. You play literally as a knight who has a shovel, and that is his weapon.
That sounds like an interesting premise.
Yes, and it takes a lot of different mechanics from old games. So it has a Mega Man feel to it. Like a lot of the enemies that you fight look like Mega Man characters that you would have fought against. It's got a little bit of Zelda 2 to it, where like when you visit a town, like it very much looks like what Zelda 2 looked like. It plays like the old DuckTales game. So they've like taken a lot of different elements and combined them. But it doesn't feel like they're just stealing it from those games. It feels like a homage to those games. And so I cannot recommend it enough to people. So it's not a super long game, like all of those games where you can beat them really in a matter of hours if you just sat down and played them. But it's got a great sense of humor to it. One of my favorite parts is that you walk into this town and this guy meets you at the gates and he says, you can't come in here with any weapons. And he goes, oh, that's not a weapon, that's just a shovel. So
this town has no zombies in it.
Yeah. Yes, no zombies. Which, by the way, I have been playing a little bit of Dead Rising 3, and the other night I combined a motorcycle with a steamroller, and I mean the possibilities after that are just endless.
A lot of red screen, I'm sure.
Yeah. So that's what I've been playing. Andrew, my friend, what have you been up to?
I have not been playing very many games since we last spoke, Jeff. I've played a little bit of Kingdoms of Amalur, just enough to complete, 4 or 5 side quests and get absolutely nothing done on the main campaign. And I have a feeling that this is going to be that game for me, where I actually do not complete anything on the main campaign because I'm too busy running back and forth across the map with these silly little fetch quests and not actually doing what I set out to do. But that's half the fun, right? So.
Yeah. So what inspired you to play it?
I'm not really sure I can put a finger on it. It just seemed to jump out at me. It looked like fun. It got a lot of really negative press over the last year and a half, I think. But it looked, it always just looked enjoyable to me. Fun art style. It seemed a little bit more bright and chipper than the stuff that you normally see nowadays. Even like Skyrim and the like. It's a little bit more drab and gothic than this. It's a little bit more colorful. So I think that's part of it. Maybe I'm just a little bit like a bird, just ooh, shiny, something pretty, and I went over and checked it out. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
Awesome. A side question, because Ian and Angie, you both kind of talked about how, like, you kind of haven't been playing games as much. How do you get out of that funk where you just haven't been able, like, what is the...
Well, Jeff, I think some people would call it a funk. I think some people would call it being productive.
earning paychecks.
Earning paychecks, exactly. The thing is, I think for me, I have certain things I'm like, ooh, I need to experience this. And also, I mean, I live in a different world because it's my job, but I think that there are certain games that just kind of grab my attention. Like, I didn't plan to play Monument Valley, right? Which was this game for iOS and Android that's really fun puzzle game that's very artistically done. It was at the top of the App Store for a very long time. And when I saw it, I was like, ooh, this is just really neat. And it promises to be only a couple of hours. I was like, sure, I'll give a couple of my hours to my life to this. And I was glad I did it. But the part of it is that that there's so much attention going to the top of the pile. And by that I mean, like, the AAA titles that are 80 hours long, and you just have to invest like a portion of your life to it. There's so much attention being paid to those that it's hard to invest, right? And to say, all right, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm really excited about, for example, The Last of Us coming out for the PS4. I'm excited to see what it looks like, and it's going to be really cool to see how the zombies are different. But at the end of the day, will I finish it? I'm not entirely sure, because even that game, which is not that long, is something to invest. And it's the summer, and I have to go out in the gray skies of San Francisco, and so, it's hard to, there's a lot of things that push and pull, and I'm not even like Joe, who has a baby. Like, he's got 10 times harder, but that's the experience that I'm up against.
Yeah, Joe just straps the baby to his chest and plays the game.
There you go.
I guess that's
eventually give it the controller. It can be the second player.
yeah, that's a fatherhood tip for anybody listening.
Yes.
Yeah, just strap the baby to your chest and just keep playing the game, and hopefully it doesn't wake up when you get frustrated at a certain point of the game. So, but I have to agree with you, Ian. I am also looking forward to Last of Us Remastered. But like you, I don't like. It's probably going to take me a lot longer to finish it than probably what most people are experiencing, where they like play through it in a week. It'll probably take me like at least a month to get through that.
Did you play the original one, or did you not?
I did not play the original one.
Oh, so you're in a different camp, right? I played through the original. I really enjoyed it, much more than I expected to. So for me, this is more of a experience than it is a going through the game, actually, right? To me, it's like coming back to Disneyland as a 20-year-old, right, and seeing how different it might look from when you were 5.
Definitely. Well,
things are much smaller than I thought they were.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to let you know what I think about it whenever I do play it. But I'm definitely looking forward to it. So I'm glad that we at least have some things on the horizon that we want to play, or that we have some games that we're playing right now that we're enjoying. But what I would like to talk to you about is the games that we used to play back in the day, or the games that we first played. If you're not watching and you're listening, I'm holding up my Nintendo NES system that I had from back in the day. I'll just kind of start off by saying that my introduction to the NES was my dad sat my brother and I down on the couch, and we thought we were in trouble. We were like, oh no, what do we do? And he said, I want you to reach under the couch cushions. And we reached under there, and we pulled out Paperboy and Duck Hunt, and had the little orange gun that it came with. So my first introduction to video games was the NES, and I have to say, like, I think it's funny that my first experience was not playing a game that had like the classic controller, but it was that gun, the zapper that they had. And so like for me, did you guys ever get to play Duck Hunt or anything like that?
Oh, please, of course. There was no way not
absolutely.
to play that game.
So
you couldn't miss that game. It was everywhere. If you played video games, you had to use the zapper.
yeah, so that was a blast for me. Like I had so much fun playing that, and it still has like a special place in my heart today. And when several years ago, when they announced that they're going to release something similar for the Wii, like I just bought it out of pure nostalgic value, like where you shove the Wii remote in there and you put the nunchuck in there. I thought that it was going to, bring back a nostalgic feeling, but really it was just wasted money. I shouldn't have done it, but I just wanted to relive that so bad. And but my favorite game, my favorite game that my first favorite game that I can think of was Super Mario 2. And I just could not play that game enough. And if you're not familiar with that game, like that's the one where you can play as the different characters, and that just like blew my mind that you could play as Mario, Luigi, Princess Toadstool at the time, and Toad, and they had all of these different abilities. And so I absolutely loved that game. Did you guys ever did you like that title, or what was your experience with it?
I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was a fun game. It's funny because now we've learned that it was actually a totally different game, like Arabian Nights or something in Japan. And so you suddenly realize, oh, that's why it was such a different looking game from every other Mario that ever came out. It was also, by the way, neat trivia fact, one of the only games where you could play as Princess Toadstool until the recent Mario Wii U game. If you were just to take the Mario, adventure games, right? Obviously, you could play as her during the racing games and whatnot. But it's really, I actually was more of a fan of Mario 3 myself. Although it wasn't my favorite, I thought it was the best of the series. At least if we're going to talk about the NES stuff.
Yeah. And so, what was your first experience with it, Ian?
So my first experience was at my babysitter's house. I remember distinctly that she had a VW for some reason bug, and they had Turbo Racing, which, if you remember that game, that was featured on. Oh, what was the movie with Fred Savage where he's
The Wizard?
The Wizard, yes. It was the bad guy, right, who had a Nintendo glove, right, and he was able to somehow. I still don't know how he played the game, but you can look this up on YouTube. He's able to play the game better than anyone ever could using the glove. But it was that specific racing game. And I remember I was just entranced by it, and it was just so fun. And then I remember, after that, playing Mario and really enjoying it. But my real first experience was with Turbo Racing, which is fun because I think most people actually, their first experience was with Mario or Duck Hunt. But my favorite one, if we're going to talk about that kind of age period, I played Zelda 2, then and back. I learned the top hat and everything. I had Nintendo Power. But I think my favorite game still is A Link to the Past. I feel like that game, and especially when they came out with 3DS, the Link Between Worlds, which was just a complete fan service to people like me. Link to the Past was just a fun and deep game, and it was the first real kind of open world, even though the original one had that too. It was like, I don't know, it had a depth to it that no other game had, and it was really quite remarkable. And to this day, if you ever hack your iPhone or, whatever, and I'm not saying that I did this, but I could imagine doing this, that is the game that I choose to play every time. It's super fun.
Yeah, it feels like going back home for me. It's so easy to get back into, and really it can be different each time you play it because you can tackle those dungeons in a different order. Right. And yeah, I totally agree with you. And I'll never forget, how that game starts off where I guess it's your dad like
Your
he
uncle.
believes, or your uncle, yeah.
Whoever. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. There's
Who
some
cares?
dude,
Sorry.
there's some dude in your house, and you've got to follow him to the castle. And yeah, I'll never forget that experience. Like, I don't know, like they just brought you right into the action so well. And yeah, I totally agree with you, Ian. Like that.
Well, you know what's funny is that it's one of the first snackable games, if you think about it. Like it had a save mode, right? And you could just tackle little things. It's almost what makes. I mean, it goes back to my original complaint about a lot of video games today. Like they're so long and everything. I think what makes the Link to the Past, which is not a short game, a game that I can tolerate still today with my my stated opinion earlier, is that it's still snackable. Like I can just play one quest and it'll take me 20 minutes, and I put it down and I come back to it. Can come back to it a week later, and the storylines are like self-contained, right? There's the main one, but you're saving the princess, right? What is there to know? And then every individual quest has its own little storyline that is really nicely self-contained. So you get like a 20-25 minute burst, and then you're done, and you can go and live the rest of your life. And 3 weeks later, come back. It's like I don't have to remember anything. I'm just saving the princess. Oh, here's another storyline, and it's done. Now I go back to my life. So it was really well done. I can't say enough.
Yeah, and then of course, right in the middle of the game, they totally change everything around, and they
Exactly.
send you to the dark
And
world.
they even change the music on you, which is how you know it's different.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. Like it makes me want to go back and play it like tonight. You got me all pumped up on nostalgia right now, Ian. So
Just you wait, Jeff.
So Andrew, what was your first exposure to video games, and what was your favorite?
I had friends who had Nintendo Entertainment Systems, the NES. I never actually had one myself, but I remember playing, the Duck Hunt and shooting the dog, and playing Dr. Mario. Shooting the dog, of course. Well, I mean, if you're a 4-year-old, I'm sorry, Ian. Playing Dr. Mario, we just so much fun, and then playing all of those Super Mario Brothers games. But then the first video game system that I actually had myself was the original Game Boy. I had Super Mario Land and Tetris that I just played the pants off of. And then finally, my first home console system was a Super Nintendo. And that was actually where I had my very first favorite game, which is still to this day my favorite game of all time, which is Link to the Past. So it seems like we can't get off Link to the Past, yeah. But just turning on the game and then just seeing it raining was
a big deal.
Yeah, that was kind of crazy to me. I wish that they'd actually had kind of more rain scenes throughout the game, but they only did the once. But I got to the point, I was so familiar with that game, I could speed run that game and beat it in about 3.5 hours, I think. So I'm very familiar with it. I love it to death.
So Andrew, here's the question: did you play the 3DS one?
Yes, and loved that too. Yeah. It was fantastic. Check out my review of it on geekswithwives.com.
Look at me. It shows I didn't read that one.
But thank you for the opportunity to plug, Ian. But it was just a wonderful game. Fantastic. I cannot sing enough praises for Link to the Past. And that really made me into the video game fan and Geeks with Wives contributor that I am today. So you guys can blame that specific game for having to deal with me. But, oh man, just love that.
I'm curious, Andrew, why is it that game specifically is still your favorite when we've had so many, we've had these storied franchises like Halo and Gears of War and you've had Assassin's Creed and the list is too long to name, but why is it that this specific one still continues to be the top for you, and that, you know, comparatively, these games that are longer, have higher production values, whatever, are not having that kind of impact?
I think it all comes back to that sense of adventure. You know, when I started playing that game, there was nothing else really like it. And other games, I think, have tried to imitate that sense of adventure and that sense of just this wide open world for you to explore, but also that you are an important and integral part of it. And I think that nobody else has really captured that sense of magic. It also had a sense of innocence, I think, that a lot of games don't really have today. When you're playing an assassin who's, you know, out super murdering people, or you know, just blowing heads off left and right, there was something about Zelda and Link to the Past where you were just, you know, a young boy who got thrust into a situation, and it was kind of fate shine. It was his time to shine, and he needed to step up to the plate.
You know what it did for me was that it was so approachable. Like it was a game that I felt like anyone could play, and I feel like it's. You know, I replayed what was it, Zelda 64. Which one was that?
Ocarina of Time.
Ocarina of Time, right? That was on the 3DS. And what was fascinating to me is I got to nearly the end of it, and I'll be damned if I didn't have to start using the internet to help. And because especially like the sand castle or whatever with the moving water, like I was just I don't have the time to figure this out. And what's fascinating with me is that, again, I mean, with Link Between Worlds, I was able to play that whole thing without any help from the internet, and I enjoyed. Like I wasn't too frustrated. It was hard, but the path was in front of me, and I felt like it was so approachable. And that's something I feel like lacks in a lot of titles these days. Like they're good, but there's so much complexity that it's almost like it's more puzzle than game.
They're almost a little overbuilt.
Yeah, I think that's why The Last of Us was also a good game. It's just running back to that. Is that it's like the path is directly in front of you. It's pretty much you cannot miss how the story goes forward, and you're just kind of along for the ride and doing your best to get through it as best as you can. You know?
One of the other things that I think that Link to the Past has going for it, and longtime listeners and readers of Geeks with Wives will notice that a lot of our contributors are really big fans of atmosphere in games, and I think that Link to the Past had this essence about it that just seemed to appeal to the 10-year-old boy in everybody. Yeah. That, you know, things were bright and shiny. You were just a simple kid who was going to go and save a princess. You got to have swords, which was cool. Which, you know, Mario doesn't have any kind of cool weapons like that. But then at the same time, you know, you kind of had that quest that you were going on, and it didn't seem really dark and grim and you know, overbearing. But it was just, you know, a sense of, hey, let's go on an adventure today, just like the kind of adventure you could have in your backyard. I have two really distinct memories of Link to the Past playing through my very first time. The first one was the first boss, the Armos Knights that are bouncing up and down in a circle pattern. There's 8 of them or 10 of them, I think. And I just could not beat that because I was trying to go through with my sword and kill them all. And I got really frustrated, and I didn't play that game for like 2 months. I came back to it and then just got really fed up and shot one with an arrow, and he just like died immediately. And just this sense of accomplishment I got, I think I've been chasing that in video games ever since. That sense of, I did it. And so I've just been trying to, you know, recapture that feeling ever since. And then the second big emotional impact I think I had was when they had that false ending, and I'm like, I've beat the game, destroyed Aghanim, I'm done, and then all of a sudden I get booted into the dark world, and just the feeling of, oh my gosh, there's a whole nother 7 dungeons for me to take on here, and just the sense of I thought I was great, and I was great, but there's even more, and just the excitement that maybe I could recapture that sense of accomplishment that I did in the first dungeon. You know, nobody else I think has really pulled off that false ending as convincingly with me since. And so I just the joy of having a whole second world to go into was just uh, uh, so exciting to 10-year-old Andrew. So
Man, that's great. Yeah, I think if there's one thing that Link to the Past taught us is that if you see a statue and you come across it,
Don't walk up to it.
Yeah, it's going to come to life. I'll never forget. We're jumping forward a couple of generations of consoles, but I remember playing Resident Evil 4, and there's like a corridor of all of these statues, and you're like, all right, they're going to come to life. I'm just going to go ahead and walk through them right now. So, yeah. Well, man, I didn't realize that the three of us had so much love for A Link to the Past, but it's not really surprising. Like we said, when it introduced so many great things. What in your guys' minds, I guess, what is the one thing that it introduced that you feel like has carried over into other games the best? What is its legacy?
It's funny. I can't actually put my finger on anything that it did differently. It's that they did it all right. Like a lot of when you think about it, like open world, well, no, the original Zelda had that. And if you think about the idea of these dungeons, of course, the original Zelda had that too, and the snackability. It had better graphics, but who cares? Like I think that what it really did right was just simply the way that they packaged it all together. And maybe it was one of the first real games to have like sub-stories. Like that was something that was slightly new, I think, probably, or at least in a way that it wasn't just a throwaway idea, right? Like the kid in the meadow, like that had a whole storyline to it that reverberated through the whole world. And so that's something that was new. I think a lot of games before that, like, you're like, oh, okay, this guy like lost his kid, sure, whatever, and then you leave the town and you never hear from him again. So that's kind of maybe something that they offered that was groundbreaking. But otherwise, it was really just that they hit every note correctly.
Definitely. Go ahead, Andrew.
I think that kind of mentality there, the sum is worth more than the parts kind of thing, is one thing that Link to the Past brought to the table. It was one of the first real games in my opinion, to really have an emphasis on music and just create some legendary soundtracks. There were some before, but that's the first one that I really remember is just blowing the music out of the water.
Yeah.
And then
Ocarina of Time really took it up to the next level.
Absolutely.
That was the thing that Ocarina of Time did great, was they had a soundtrack that was amazing.
Yeah, they kicked it up to 11 there.
Yeah.
Not to include a music pun or anything, but
turned it up to 11. That's fun.
So I think also, speaking of atmosphere, that's one of the first ones that really tried to create a tone in the environmental storytelling there. A lot of previous games, I mean, they would maybe say words that were dark and spooky or lighthearted and fun, but the picture didn't always match the dialogue that was going on. Castlevania maybe, but that's really it that I can think of, and I think that just that sense of adventure was carried on everywhere in Link to the Past. I would say also doing the world switching bit is something that has carried on in subsequent Zelda games especially, but elsewhere in gaming as well. Just the ability to switch worlds or alter the landscape somehow, and then have a whole new set of things to explore.
Yeah, yeah. I think as far as Zelda titles are concerned, like you see, like they have the normal world and the dark world, and then Ocarina of Time, you have like the past, and then you travel into the future. Like they definitely continue to carry that through. And one of the things I like about Ocarina of Time is that when you interacted with different parts of, the past, like it would influence, like it would allow you to get to other parts in the future world. So, like I feel like the Link to the Past series just kind of like laid the groundwork through which built a lot of inspiration for future developers when they worked on Zelda titles. So, I mean, yeah, we cannot say enough about Link to the Past, and I'm glad that I'm sitting with two other guys that had a, as great of an experience with it as I did. And I gotta say, Andrew, I am impressed with the fact that you could do a speed run of that game. That is awesome.
Yeah, that's I guess one of the feathers in my gaming cap that is probably means that I have spent too much time with the controller in my hand. But just knowing exactly where everything is and where to go, I've beaten that game probably too many times, but it's so much fun.
Awesome. Well, yeah. If you do not have an NES, I'm holding it back up on the screen again, or a Super Nintendo, find your most, the closest retro gaming store in your area, and definitely pick one up.
But do not blow on the cartridges.
Yes, so tell us about this, Ian. I need to know.
Well, I'm totally crediting Mental Floss for this, the blog. You can look it up, Mental Floss, Nintendo cartridges. So according to them, it was always bad to do this, and it actually made it worse. So for some reason, we all got the idea that if the game didn't work when you plugged it in, because I guess that's just the way technology worked back then, and what would happen, we all know, we'd plug it in, and then suddenly the screen was all jumbled and everything, and so we took it out and we blew on it because that's what we thought worked, and there was dust in it or something. So it turns out when we blew on it, we actually were blowing spittle would obviously come out of your mouth, and it would land on the contact tabs for the cartridge and actually cause rust and do the opposite of what we wanted. And so, of course, Mental Floss and all of their awesomeness tested this theory to the extreme and showed how bad it can be on these cartridges. But I was convinced that it. So they say actually all you had to do was take it out and put it back in, and more often than not, it was just seating it correctly, which is really frustrating if you think about it. Like all that time we would sit there and go, it was always wrong. So yeah, turns out everything we knew was wrong. That's what it comes down to.
Man, I'm gonna have to rethink my entire childhood now.
Think of all this time you could have saved if you weren't blowing into a cartridge silly, right? Sorry, Mom, just a second.
Ian, you remind me of in the NBA playoffs this year. I forget who it was who was blowing in LeBron James's ear, and Nintendo photoshopped a Super Nintendo cartridge or an NES cartridge over LeBron's face, so he was blowing into the cartridge. So,
whoever is running, can I just say that Twitter accounts for a lot of these game companies are just hilarious these days. Sometimes, like they really like Xbox during the launch period. Like they had this Lego figure that was really excited about the Xbox One launch, and Nintendo has had a very reactive Twitter feed. And Sony as well. Like they all seem to have just really, they got some really smart community organizers right now, because they're just, every once in a while I'll look over on my Twitter feeds and I'm like, that's a good chuckle. And it's a lot better than the seriousness of a lot of other companies that's like, here's our new product announcement today, and and we love our customers. And it's like, great, I'm glad that you're using Twitter for this. So so it's really interesting.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned, Xbox and Sony and how they're using social media. A lot of news was shared recently on Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo with the NPD figures that came out.
I like that segue. That was pretty good.
Yeah. So, yeah. Let's talk about that real quick. What stood out to you?
Well, so obviously consoles are still selling pretty well. They grew, they doubled again the sales, but that's off of a small base because things were rough. But what's interesting is that software continues to be struggling. Now remember, NPD, everyone will always point out, NPD is of retail sales in the U.S., so it's not the worldwide, but it's an interesting indicator, especially since the U.S. is such a large market. And what's interesting is that if you look at today, for example, Electronic Arts announced their quarterly earnings, and their sales are up, and they say attach rates are good, and that things are actually looking very positive. But what's fascinating is that the rest of the industry seems to be struggling. So there's a couple of things we could be seeing from this, right? One is that it sucks to be in the US if you're a game maker. Now that's possible. Another is that people are hurting, like EA, who is the top next-gen game maker so far, according to them, that EA is pulling a lot of sales away from their competitors. It's also possible. Or it's also possible that EA is feeling very good about what's going on, but that it's not as good as they suggest, which I doubt is true. I have a feeling that they are doing really well, and that likely they're either pulling share away from their competitors or they're seeing more success overseas. There's the other part of it as well. I should mention fourth option, which is that NPD, excuse my cat, that NPD doesn't track the digital side. And one thing that EA has been stressing a lot is that sales from downloadable content from their Ultimate Teams and all that stuff has been doing really, really well. And so that type of stuff, and especially they said Madden and NHL have been doing fantastic with Ultimate Team, which is new for them. Those were smaller than its FIFA soccer stuff, which has just been blowing it out of the water lately. So what's really fascinating is if that's true, okay. So there's another company that I follow called SuperData, which puts out data along with NPD, and I use it as kind of the other half of this of the coin, if you will, the other side of the coin when it comes to this data. And they're showing console sales are up. So console game sales are up on their stuff, which is just the digital side, and it's down on retail. So does that mean that GameStop is having a bad year? I don't know. We'll really see. I think the other thing about GameStop is that EA made a point this today of saying that GameStop has been very good about being part of this this kind of digital trend. They're selling stuff like you can buy $40 worth of credit or whatever for $10 if you buy it with the game at GameStop. So they sell you a code, right, and then you go off. So GameStop is obviously very much they're in the game, if you will, trying to be a part of this all. So the question then becomes, okay, if they're doing okay, which we'll find out their earnings sometime soon, then does that mean Walmart and Target are losing share to them? And so it's really fascinating just to see how this is playing out. It's very mixed, but also the bottom line for a lot of this is that the next generation consoles seem to be doing pretty well, at least right now. The thing that I always point out to people is, the last generation of consoles, we saw them hit 300 million or so units. Right now we're hitting maybe 20 million by the end of the year, 25. So that's I mean, there's a big difference between 300 and 25. And so we need to figure out what does the next 275 million look like, and how does it play out, right? And who are these people, and why haven't they bought one yet, and what's going to get them to buy one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what will the attach rates look like? So there are all these questions that are still unknown. The initial indicators are good still, but there's still a lot of questions, and we just don't know how it's going to play out.
Yeah, I was especially intrigued by the fact that it was the people's interest, the consumer interest in the Wii U has increased by 50%. I saw a recent survey that was posted on that. Looks like Nintendo has, I don't want to say turned it around, but they are certainly correcting a lot of things that that a lot of people were frustrated about.
I don't disagree with you. I think that they have
Yeah.
definitely answered a lot of questions around it. But I think the other thing that one has to remember is that surveys don't mean sales.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who were very interested in the HP tablet when it came out in 2010, and then got done and thrown into a grave 8 months later. It's very hard to tell. Like these surveys are often you have to really be thinking about, okay, who are these respondents? Where is this data coming from? If it's an online survey, which a lot of them are, there's a question you have to ask about: where did this data come from? Who were these online respondents? Were they on a game blog, right? I mean, if it's a survey from a game blog, out the window. Like that's not, most of those people have already bought their consoles. So you have to really kind of think about what are these things going on. It's definitely positive for Nintendo that there's increased interest, if that's true. But they've got to turn it into real sales. And the struggle right now has been that they have not been hitting that mark.
It's also worth pointing out that it's easier to increase by 50% when nobody's really interested.
You're on a slow base. Exactly. Very true. But to be fair to them, Mario Kart 8 has been absolutely killing it, and it's one of the only first-party titles, right? Titles made by the game console maker that's been hitting near the top of NPD, and that is something that has been very good for them. I don't think Mario World even made it, so that says a lot. Like that says that they're doing pretty well. Granted, there's not that much competition at the moment, but we'll give them this win here.
I think also, and Ian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the top-selling game was Watch Dogs,
yes.
And number 2 was Mario Kart, and that if you didn't count the fact that Watch Dogs is coming out on PS4 and Xbox One and PS3 and Xbox 360, and just included any one of those, then that Mario Kart would have been the best-selling game.
Well, we don't know that. So
okay.
We have to be clear. Nobody except for the people who pay NPD knows what individual unit sales look like. There was some data that was put out there by one blog that purported to be NPD data. That was the private stuff that journalists don't get, and it turned out that wasn't real, and that's what NPD told me. So you have to be very careful assuming that. Now, the other thing is that that's somewhat of a straw man, right? Just because Watch Dogs is sold widely does not mean that it becoming the top game is any less of a case. Like at the end of the day, X number of people put down $60 to play that game, and they didn't put down $60, or not as many people put down $60 to play Mario Kart. And that's what it comes down to. Like you can swing it however you want, and you can try and say, well, whatever. At the end of the day, that's what happened, and that's the brass tacks. And so, sure, Mario Kart is doing really well. Let's not discount that. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that, if it were with an asterisk, it would have been the number one.
And on the note of Watch Dogs, I think it's encouraging to see a new franchise perform successfully.
It is. Yes. And it's doing very well. The real question, though, is, and NPD said this themselves, there wasn't much competition this month. Like, June was a very slow month for the game industry. There just weren't that many releases. And so how will Watch Dogs do when The Last of Us comes out? How will Watch Dogs do when we hit September and Grand Theft Auto comes out? Like, those are the questions that we start asking, because I don't know if Watch Dogs is succeeding right now because it's an amazing game that people love to play and that it's a sustainable franchise, or if it's because it's a really good game that has no competition. And that's the questions you have to ask. And of course, at the end of the day, we'll probably never know. But we'll know soon enough, because when the next one comes out,
we'll find out when Watch Dogs 2 comes out.
Yeah, it'll have stiffer competition, and then we'll have a better sense of things. But this is what it's about. Like, one of the things that a lot of people ignore about how smart Take-Two Interactive can be about things is that they launched Grand Theft Auto 5 when there was practically no competition. Right? It came out in September last year, and there were no Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3 games that were serious contenders against them, right? There were other games that were different genres, but they had almost an open and clear field to go after, and they killed it. They became the best-selling game of all time.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Ian,
yeah.
but I think that there were several other games that were scheduled in September, and everything got moved around just because Grand Theft Auto set its date.
Well, that's a fun thing to say, but people knew when it was coming out, and there is some jumbling around, but you have to think that what happens is that by the time by a certain point in the cycle, when you're getting ready to launch, like, you pay for marketing, you pay for shelf space, you pay the delivery people, you pay for disc printing, like all these things, and let's not mention also inventory. All these things have to be lined up way ahead of time. And if you start moving this stuff around, it can cost you millions and millions and millions of dollars. So it's a fun thing to say on the forums, yeah, people were scared of Grand Theft Auto 5. I'm not sure how serious that is. And if they were, they would have made those moves way earlier than when they made those moves. I think that probably what happened is that a lot of those games weren't ready because they had a lot of struggles to go up to get ready for the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One versions as well. I think that there were a lot of things. I mean, look at how Battlefield played out, right? Battlefield 3 had a lot of struggles that EA acknowledged and has worked really hard to fix. How much of that had a part to play that they were working with an old, next gen and previous gen systems, when if they just released it for next gen, would it have been more stable? We don't know. But those are the kinds of things that you have to consider as well. I don't subscribe to the belief that people were just scared to hell of Grand Theft Auto. That doesn't ring well in my ears when I think of how the system actually works. It sounds great on a forum.
Mm-hmm. So then, just because I've heard similar things today, Battlefield Hardline getting moved into 2015, early 2015, it seems to suggest that it's a similar thing, since we're going to have a really shooter-dense holiday season, fall season.
I wouldn't debate that with you. I would say, though, that the costs associated, again, with moving it back are pretty high. I think EA is making a calculation that they screwed up on Battlefield 3 with a number of features that they don't want to screw up this time. And let's give EA a little credit. During E3, they really worked really hard to say, hey, we care about you guys as customers. We realize that we didn't do the best job last year. We had The Sims, we had Battlefield 3, we had some struggles. So here, we're going to give you the beta during E3, and then you guys tell us what you want. And people responded, and on the conference call today, they said, we heard stuff about having a better the storyline about cops and robbers, and having new innovative stuff in multiplayer. And those were things that they may not have been putting as much effort toward, that they now are going to because they're pushing it back. So I wouldn't assume that it's just because of competition, because frankly, if they're afraid of the competition, then this is not going to be a game that succeeds anyway. I think that reality is that they had other things pushing them. If they were moving it a couple weeks, then maybe, right? But I would not bet that moving it back as much as they did, right? I mean, we're talking about months here that they were doing that because they were scared of Destiny and Call of Duty. They've had worse competition.
I think that one of the best points you just made is that this is a multi-million-dollar company, and if it's a product that they don't believe in, then what are they doing?
Exactly.
It's one of those things where they have to believe in everything that they do just because there's so much money riding on it. So,
and also on top of that, they're making this effort to be like, we love you, customers, come back. Don't consider us the worst company in the world anymore. And to be able to
silly, but yeah.
Well, but hey, it happened, right? And
it
like
did.
it or not, enough consumers were frustrated that they voted it that way. And I personally, if I were voted the worst company in the world, I would slap it on my box, and I'd say, you know what? My customers care so much that they said this. But that's me. But at the end of the day, that what's interesting to me is that they really want to be able to kind of open up their arms and say, we want to work with you guys. And that's, if they're going to play through that and be able to actually show that, they need to deliver games that are objectively better than the last ones they came out with, because that's part of the point that they're making, right? That they care about their customers. So, I think that's part of this. I think that they don't want to screw up with these first couple of shots out of the coming out of the gate. Now that they're saying we really care, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Not that they didn't care before, but now they care more, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, it went to 10 from maybe 7. I don't know.
It went to 11.
Yes, well, that's the way they're talking about it, right? I mean, a beta during E3, that's not a minor thing,
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see where it all turns out, this holiday season, and see if they can. I mean, I would not be surprised if the consoles still remain successful, because there are a lot of great titles coming out this holiday season. So.
Well, there's no question. I think it's no question they'll be successful. It's how much are they going to grow, right?
Yeah.
How much more growth is there versus just being, okay, it's going to be the same 300 million and it'll be the same sales at the end of the day. It's about what is the line looking like? Is it going north and to the right, or is it going flat and to the right, or is it going south? And those are the questions that people like me have to ask.
Keep asking them, Ian. Keep asking. Well, we definitely appreciate your breakdown of that, Ian. And once again, I always look forward to having you on the podcast. I definitely appreciate your perspective in the industry. And we come to the point of our podcast where we give you our final thoughts. And Ian, since you are the master tonight, we ask you, what is your final thoughts, sir?
So I am really curious about some of these alternative game systems. I don't know what it is, but I've gotten a wild hair about Oculus lately, and I've been really digging into it a lot. I don't know if you noticed, I put out a story about them having motion controllers, and that how they're working on these. I'm really fascinated about what they're going to try and do and how they're going to try and break into this, triumvirate of Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony. And it's really interesting. And part of it is that there's a lot of attention and effort being put into them. I mean, there are so many game makers that I've met over the last year who are making VR games who I'd never heard of before. And it's just really fascinating to see where this is going. I mean, is this a big bubble, right? A virtual reality bubble that, granted, Facebook threw $2 billion at, or is it a real legitimate thing that's going to change the industry? I don't know, but it's going to be really interesting to watch. So that's where I've been, and then obviously I'm looking at some of these other ones, like Ouya is still around, right? And everyone keeps calling it dead, but hey, they're still doing what they're doing. So I'm really curious about just kind of these other consoles and how much legs they have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And of course, Sony has Project Morpheus.
They do, exactly, which is another. It's not a small effort in virtual reality.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
Ian, I heard something today. I've never really understood exactly the how they're going to go about marketing and actually turning like Project Morpheus into an actual product.
That's a great question.
And I heard something today that was the first time that something really kind of jumped out at me about it. But at San Diego Comic-Con, Fox or Marvel or somebody like that is trying to publicize X-Men by you put on the Project Morpheus, and it's supposed to imitate Professor Xavier's Cerebro machine, so you can look around the floor, the convention floor there, and spot people who are supposed to be mutants, and you're supposed to hunt for Mystique. And so it's a quick, like 30, 45 second, 2 minute, something like that, game to play. And that's the first time that I've been able to see, oh, okay, I understand how that works conceptually as a quick game, and how that can be a product or something. But then you would be selling it rather than to consumers like you and I. You'd be selling it to like companies as display pieces instead.
Well, the thing is, I don't think people know how virtual reality is going to play out. And to be fair, I think that's an AR game, which is augmented reality, where it's totally different. Computer overlaid on real images.
Exactly.
I don't know how it's going to be marketed. I think there's a lot of question marks in the air about who's going to buy it, how are they going to sell it to us, what do you need? Like, I mean, it's just the list goes on and on and on, and do I need to take Dramamine every time I play it, and all these things. So, there's a lot of people, right, including the CEO of Oculus. He's apparently like one of the most sensitive people getting motion sickness, which is hilarious. So I don't know how that's going to play out, and I think that's where a lot of people still don't know. Like, the marketing efforts still are still in the early stages. You have to imagine, we all know what is going on with most of this stuff, but go out on the street on a Saturday and find random people, especially not gamer-looking people, not that there's a type, and ask them, do you know what Morpheus is? And if they say The Matrix, you'll be impressed, right? Most of them have no idea what you're talking about. And so while we all know $2 billion was spent by Facebook and that Sony is putting a ton of effort into this, most people don't. And those are the people that they need to frankly attract to make this a mass market product. Like, they can't just survive on the hardcore gamers. And so that's the real question, is how does this get beyond that group?
Yeah. Right now it is really that cool, interesting piece of technology, but where's the product? And that's the key right there, is identifying that.
I'm sure we're going to find out in the next probably, I'd say 8 to 10 months, we're going to really get a sense of what it's going to look like. I think you're going to see Oculus Connect, that's coming up in September. That's going to be in Hollywood. I'm sure that we're going to start getting to see the mechanisms of how this is going to play out. I don't know for sure. I have no idea. But I'm just guessing, like, that's one of the first big events that Oculus is holding on its own. So no matter what it is, it's a marketing event, right? Mm-hmm. So we're going to start to see the kind of machinations of how do you explain this to people. And I'm sure it'll be very closely watched.
Well, we'll look forward to I'm looking forward to seeing what happens at Comic-Con. I want to find the mutants. I want to put on the Morpheus and find the mutants. So, Andrew, what is your final thought?
Well, I think I've talked about it on the show before, but I'm a really big fan of the American Ninja Warrior, and I'm not sure if you guys watched it this past week, but they actually had a young lady complete the city finals for the first time ever, and it was just fantastic. I mean, it was just mind-blowing watching her go through that course, and I am so jazzed about it, so excited about it. If you are not watching this show, you need to watch it. Sit down and give it a shot one night. If it's not for you, it's not for you. But I think it's the best show on television this year, this season. It's best show on TV. Check it out.
Yeah, I actually got the chance to watch that as it was unfolding. I couldn't believe it, and I also felt like really bad about myself not because she's a woman and I don't think that women are capable of doing things like that, but I'm just like, oh my gosh, like just the sheer physicality that somebody has to have, just the physical attributes that you have to have in order to do that, and I'm like, I'm nowhere near that at all.
The athleticism that is required is just astounding, and it reaches a point where it's really inspirational, and you're like, yes, I need to do this. I can set out, I can dedicate myself, and I can accomplish something. And then it goes beyond that, and you go, no, never mind, I'm not going to be that good. But I have a staircase outside my apartment that's it's got the open-ended stairs. It doesn't have the back to them, so you can stick your feet between the stairs. You know what I mean? And they have one of the obstacles is the double staircase, where you hang from those and you climb up the back side of them with your hands, just lifting yourself up. So I told my wife, I'm going to try this. So we walked outside my apartment, and I grabbed onto the stairs, and I started to lift myself up, and then I turned to her and said, nope, this isn't going to happen. And just let go and fell the 2 inches back to earth and was like, all right, clearly they are in better shape than I am, and I think far too highly of myself. But one day I will be able to do, something athletic and not feel bad about myself afterward. I think that's my current intention. Let's not say Ninja Warrior, but let's say run twice around the block and not be out of breath.
I like it. American Ginger Warrior. I think that should be the next one.
I think you're on to something, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll run it past NBC and see what happens.
Yeah.
I think we need to do one which is non-judgmental Ninja Warrior, where the normal people play, and we only get halfway through a pull-up, but it's okay.
Yes, and then we have the people in the audience applauding and screaming for us, cheering us on. Yeah, I think so.
Ironic.
The positive body image Ninja Warrior.
There you go.
Well. Yeah, and I'm glad that you let go of the ledge, Angie. I think you made the right decision by doing that.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, my final thought this evening is I am getting really pumped about the next Hunger Games movie. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but they've released little teaser ads where it's not really a trailer, but it's an address from President Snow, who's the bad guy of the books and of the movies, and just seeing that again, I'm so pumped for it, and I cannot wait.
Did you read the books?
I did read the books. Yeah.
I was a little disappointed by the second movie compared to the book. I felt like the books just did a far better job explaining things. I'm sure I sound like every snobbish book person, but I'm a little worried for what the third, because I felt like the third book was the weakest of the three, and I'm worried that if the movie is weaker than the second one, it's going to be even worse, and I'll just be very sad that I spent $18.
Ian, I think that, who was that? Suzanne Collins who wrote that? I think that she was really in her wheelhouse when she had kind of that arena setting that was in the first two books.
Yeah, it worked so much better than the war setting.
Yeah, she got away from it. It seemed like she wasn't really in her element for the entirety of the third book.
Yeah.
Whereas I think that Hollywood probably feels comfortable doing battles. So I think that comparatively, the third movie is going to do a lot better. Maybe it won't be as good as the book. I don't know. But
the thing is, the first movie
my hopes aren't dashed
was amazing. The first movie was really fun to watch.
Yes.
And so I was like, okay, you can do the arena thing. And then the second one, it felt like a toy version of the first one. It felt fake in some way. I don't know. It just felt like it was not the same thing. And so I agree with you, though. Movie industry is much better at portraying war than anything else. And so I'm sure you're right. I'm sure that they'll be able to handle it better. But the struggle is that they don't have as good a material to work from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I have to agree with you as far as the books being better than what the films have done. I just like the fact that it's told from Katniss's perspective, and you don't know what else is going on in the outside world. That is I think what is most compelling for me, and you don't know what Haymitch is doing while she's in the battle, and there's just so much mystery around that. So I definitely agree, but at this point I'm just so hooked that I just want more. I just want more content. That I'm just they're gonna get my money no matter what, and I'm probably just gonna, even if it's bad, I'll just convince myself that it was good and it was the best thing ever.
We'll make fun of you later for it.
Hey, that's fine. That's fine. I was a fan of the Virtual Boy, so if that tells you anything. What?
Oh, you're a real fan of the underdogs here.
Yeah, I know.
Either that or he just really likes migraines.
Yeah, there you go.
That's true. Yeah. Let's not go back into that though. No, but once again, thank you guys for being on the podcast tonight. I want to go by real quick and just let everybody know, if you want to find out what's going on, go with the to the Geeks with Wives website, which is just geekswithwives.com. We also have a Facebook page. We don't talk about it a lot, which is a shame because Bobby Ann, who works on our Facebook page, she does a great job of, getting the content out there. And so if you're on Facebook, definitely get on there and you find our Geeks with Wives page and like it and just kind of keep up with everything that we're doing. And you can also find us on Twitter at Geeks with Wives. And guys, where can we find you on Twitter? Ian, where can we find you on Twitter?
You can find me on any social network or website or whatever under the username Ian Scher. I'm always somewhere under Ian Scher.
Awesome. I like the consistency.
Yeah, I really try for that.
Yeah, I know. It's not so much just for everybody else, but it's like for you because it's so difficult to keep up with everything. Yeah, I totally understand.
It's really laziness on my part.
And Andrew, where can we find you?
Well, I am consistently inconsistent, but you can find me on Twitter at acbarton08.
That's good enough for me. That's good enough for me. Yeah, and you can find me at Gentle Jeffrey on Twitter. We definitely appreciate you listening, and once again, you can find the actual podcast and download it on iTunes every Friday. So if you're listening to it, then you've already done the right thing. But definitely let other people know about it. Tweet about it, and you can go on iTunes and you can review our podcast, and you can tell us what you liked, what you didn't like. But of course, we know that you loved it. There can't be any kind of criticism. It's just got to be the best thing ever. So, no, but really, we appreciate you guys, and we do this for you. We hope that you have a great week, and we will see you next Tuesday. Take care, everybody.